Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're stepping away from battles, empires, and dramatic turning points of history. Tonight, we're sitting quietly beside a small campfire on the American frontier, where survival wasn't about bravery or strength, but about patience, attention, and forgotten skills that quietly kept ordinary people alive. There are no heroes here, no final victories, just cold nights, slow routines, and simple knowledge passed from hand to hand. Skills so ordinary they were never written down, yet powerful enough to decide who saw another sunrise. In this story, we'll wander through snow-covered trails, flickering firelight, humble cabins, and long winters where survival meant doing less, not more. This is not a story meant to wake you up. It's a story meant to slow you down, to let history breathe gently, and to remind your body that it is safe to rest. So before you get comfortable, take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these deep sleep history stories help you find peace, sleep better, or simply reflect on our shared journey through time. Now, close your eyes, let the fire crackle softly in the distance, feel the weight of the day fade away, and allow these forgotten survival skills to carry you quietly into sleep.
Imagine the cold first, before anything else. Not the sharp cold of a single winter night, but the slow, patient cold that settles into wood, leather, and bone after weeks without shelter. You are sitting near a small campfire, somewhere beyond the edge of the known world, in North America during the 18th century. The fire is modest, deliberately so. Too large, and it would waste precious fuel. Too bright, and it would invite eyes you do not wish to meet. The flames crackle softly, the sound blending with the whisper of wind moving through tall trees. There is no road here. No town lights in the distance, no clock to mark the hours, only darkness, firelight, and the quiet understanding that survival tonight depends not on strength, but on knowledge. This is the world of the frontiersmen, and these are the forgotten survival skills that kept them alive, skills so subtle they often looked like nothing at all. In History for Sleep, we often imagine pioneers as bold figures charging westward, rifles raised, spirits unbroken. But the truth was slower, quieter, and far more fragile. Most nights were not spent fighting, but listening. Listening to the forest, listening to the fire, listening to the body's warnings. One of the most important skills a frontiersman learned was how to exist without announcing himself. Silence was not emptiness, it was information. A snapped twig could mean a deer passing, or it could mean something else entirely. The ability to sit still for long periods, to let the forest resume its natural rhythm around you, was not a luxury, it was survival. Many pioneers learned quickly that moving less often kept them alive far more reliably than moving fast. The campfire itself was not simply for warmth, it was a carefully managed tool. Frontiersmen learned how to build what we might now call a sleeping fire, low, shielded, and long-lasting. Instead of towering flames, they favored beds of glowing embers, radiating gentle heat through the night. They positioned fires near logs or earthen banks to reflect warmth without increasing light. This allowed them to rest without fully sleeping, drifting in and out of shallow awareness. True deep sleep, the kind we enjoy tonight, was a rare luxury on the frontier. Instead, they mastered something closer to waking rest, a state where the body recovered while the senses stayed alert. Another forgotten survival skill was knowing when not to eat. Food was precious, but digestion in extreme cold drained energy. Many frontiersmen learned that a small portion before nightfall was better than a heavy meal after dark. They relied on warmth, hydration, and positioning more than fullness. Water itself was treated with care. Snow was never eaten directly, it lowered body temperature dangerously. Instead, it was melted slowly near the fire, often mixed with pine needles or bark for both flavor and trace nutrients. These small rituals were not written down in manuals, they were passed from person to person, often learned the hard way. Even posture mattered. Sleeping flat on frozen ground could steal heat in hours. Frontiersmen propped themselves slightly, using packs, rolled blankets, or natural slopes to reduce contact with the earth. They understood that the ground was not neutral, it was a silent thief of warmth. In this sleep story, as the fire burns lower and the forest breathes around you, remember that survival here was not heroic. It was attentive. It was patient. It was built from quiet decisions repeated night after night. And as you drift towards sleep, imagine those embers glowing softly, holding back the cold just enough, keeping someone alive until morning, without ever making a sound.
As the fire settles into embers, the night around you grows larger. The forest no longer feels like a wall of darkness, but a living space filled with quiet signals. For the frontiersmen, learning to read these signals was as important as knowing how to hunt or build shelter. Survival did not come from dominating the land, but from cooperating with it, listening closely enough to sense what could not be seen. One forgotten survival skill was learning how darkness itself behaves. On the frontier, darkness was not uniform. Moonlight filtered differently through pine needles than through bare branches. Snow reflected faint light even on cloudy nights, while damp soil swallowed it completely. Frontiersmen learned to move only when the darkness worked in their favor. They paused often, letting their eyes adjust fully, allowing shapes to separate themselves naturally. Rushing blinded you. Stillness restored sight. This patience extended to how they used their senses together. Hearing was never trusted alone. A sound without movement meant little. Movement without sound meant danger. They learned the natural rhythm of nighttime forests, insects pulsing, wind shifting, distant animals settling. Anything that broke this rhythm, even gently, demanded attention. Yet attention did not mean action. Often the skill was knowing when not to react. Panic wasted energy and revealed position. Calm preserved both. Temperature management was another quiet art. Frontiersmen understood that warmth was not created, but conserved. Layers mattered more than thickness. Loose garments trapped air. Tight ones stole heat. Animal skins were worn fur inward, not outward, because warmth clung to texture, not appearance. Dampness was the true enemy. A slightly colder but dry night was safer than a warmer, damp one. They dried clothing slowly near embers, never directly over flame, accepting patience over speed. Even breath was managed carefully. Breathing through cloth warmed air before it reached the lungs. Covering the mouth reduced moisture loss and prevented frost from forming inside airways. These details sound small, but the frontier was shaped by small margins. Another skill, almost invisible, was choosing where not to sleep. Valleys collected cold air, creek beds invited frost, hilltops invited wind. Frontiersmen learned to find gentle rises, places where air moved just enough to prevent cold from settling, but not enough to steal heat. They read landscapes like quiet maps, drawn not on paper, but in memory. Even trees mattered. Evergreens blocked wind. Fallen logs broke airflow. Snowdrifts revealed prevailing direction. Nothing was random. Nothing was ignored. And yet, even with all this knowledge, the frontier demanded humility. Frontiersmen accepted that sleep would come in fragments. They rested in cycles, waking briefly, checking fire, listening, then returning to shallow rest. This pattern preserved awareness without exhausting the body. It mirrored the natural rhythms of animals around them, creatures that survived not by sleeping deeply, but by sleeping wisely. Over time, this fragmented rest became familiar, even comforting, a reminder that they were part of the night, not separate from it. In this sleep story, as your own breathing slows and the room around you grows quiet, imagine learning this older rhythm, a rhythm where survival meant alignment rather than control, where knowledge passed not through books, but through nights like this one. The fire does not need to roar. The forest does not need to be conquered. You simply remain, attentive and calm, letting the night carry you safely toward morning. As the night deepens, there comes a moment when even vigilance softens. The fire is now a quiet companion rather than a focal point, and the forest has fully reclaimed its voice. For the frontiersman, this was the most delicate hour, not because danger increased, but because the mind grew tired. And here lies one of the most overlooked survival skills of all: mental discipline in the face of exhaustion. Survival on the frontier was not won by the strongest body, but by the calmest mind. Fear was not ignored. It was acknowledged, then placed gently aside. Frontiersmen learned to separate useful awareness from destructive worry. Worry imagined futures that drained strength. Awareness stayed rooted in the present moment. They trained themselves, often unconsciously, to return attention to simple anchors: the warmth of the fire on the hands, the sound of breath, the steady presence of the ground beneath them. These anchors prevented the mind from wandering into panic during long nights of uncertainty. Another quiet skill was acceptance. The frontier offered no guarantees. Storms arrived without warning, paths vanished, supplies failed. Those who survived longest were often not the most ambitious, but the most adaptable. They learned to release expectations quickly. If sleep did not come, they rested without resentment. If plans failed, they adjusted without anger. This emotional flexibility conserved enormous energy. Resisting reality was more exhausting than the cold itself. Frontiersmen also developed a deep relationship with routine, even in chaos. Small, repeated actions created stability where none existed. Tending the fire in the same way each night, checking surroundings in a familiar sequence, preparing bedding with identical motions. These routines calmed the nervous system long before anyone understood such concepts. They signaled safety to the mind, even when safety was uncertain. Over time, the body learned that these patterns meant survival continued, at least for another night.
In this way, routine became a form of shelter as real as wood or canvas. Perhaps the most forgotten skill of all was humility before time. Frontiersmen did not fight the night, they endured it. They understood that darkness always passed, no matter how long it felt. Measuring time by watches was useless here. Instead, they measured it by sensations. When embers cooled, when the wind shifted, when stars moved imperceptibly across the sky. This slow awareness prevented despair. The night was not an enemy to defeat, but a phase to move through. And eventually, without announcement, morning always arrived. In this sleep story, as your own body relaxes and the edges of thought soften, you are sharing something ancient with those figures at the edge of history. You are practicing the same quiet endurance, the same gentle patience. The forgotten survival skills that kept frontiersmen alive were not loud, dramatic, or heroic. They were subtle agreements with reality. Agreements to listen, to conserve, to adapt, and to trust that stillness itself could be protective. The fire fades further now, not extinguished, just resting. The forest remains, steady and indifferent. And you, safe and warm, are free to let go. The frontier night has done its work. You have survived it simply by staying present. And as sleep finally deepens, you drift forward, carried not by struggle, but by calm.
Before there were rifles leaning against trees, before traps were set along quiet trails, every night on the frontier began with a far simpler question. How do you make fire tonight? Not tomorrow, not in theory, but here, now, with cold pressing in wind searching for every weakness. For frontiersmen, fire was not a convenience, it was permission to survive one more night. And the art of making it in snow and wind was learned slowly, patiently, through repetition that soothed the mind as much as it warmed the body. Imagine kneeling in the hush of falling snow, the world muted, every sound softened. The first step was never striking sparks, it was preparation. They learned to gather before darkness settled fully, to move deliberately, eyes scanning the ground not for dramatic materials, but for the humble signs of dryness. Birch bark curled naturally, its papery layers hiding oils that resisted moisture. Dead grasses bent but did not break, whispering softly when twisted between fingers. Resin-rich wood, split from fallen pine, revealed a scent that promised flame even in damp air. These small discoveries were reassuring. They reminded the frontiersmen that nature still offered help if approached correctly. Fire-making in wind demanded humility. You did not fight the gusts, you worked around them. Bodies became shields, packs were placed with intention. Snowbanks were carved gently to form quiet hollows where breath and spark could survive long enough to meet. Hands moved close to the ground, not out of weakness, but wisdom. Low spaces held warmth and protected fragile beginnings. The rhythm of these movements mattered. Too fast and fibers snapped, too slow and fingers numbed. Over time, the correct pace became instinctive, almost meditative. Twisting plant fibers into a loose nest, arranging bark curls so they could breathe, stacking kindling not as a pile, but as a pathway for flame. Each action flowed into the next without urgency. Sound was kept minimal. A fire started in silence was safer and more likely to live. When the spark finally arrived, it was treated gently, as if startled by attention. Breath was controlled, exhaled slowly, guiding warmth without overwhelming it. Frontiersmen learned that force rarely created fire, patience did. The smallest glow was celebrated not with movement, but stillness.
watching, waiting, allowing heat to gather confidence. Only then did the structure grow, fed carefully, sheltered continuously. This process, repeated night after night, became more than a skill. It became a ritual. And rituals are powerful things. They calm the nervous system. They focus scattered thoughts. They turn fear into sequence. In this sleep story, as you listen to the quiet description of hands working, of fibers twisting, of sparks breathing into flame, your own body may recognize something ancient. The same slow attention that once kept frontiersmen alive now invites you toward rest. Fire, in this way, becomes not just warmth, but rhythm, a steady, reliable presence against uncertainty. The wind can move, the snow can fall, but here, in this small circle of light, something gentle endures.
Once the first fragile flame had taken hold, the work was far from finished. In many ways, keeping a fire alive through wind and snow required more skill than starting it. Frontiersmen understood that fire was not a single event, but a relationship that demanded constant, gentle attention. The wind, especially, was never treated as an enemy. It was studied, anticipated, and quietly redirected. Before adding a single piece of wood, they learned to watch how smoke moved, how sparks leaned, how embers shifted their glow. From this, they understood the invisible architecture of air. They built windbreaks not as walls, but as curves. A fallen log placed just off-center, a pack leaned at an angle. Snow shaped into a shallow crescent rather than a barrier. Straight lines invited turbulence. Gentle shapes guided airflow away from the heart of the fire. This knowledge was learned slowly, often after nights of failure, fingers numb, confidence shaken. But once learned, it transformed cold chaos into something manageable. Fuel selection followed the same quiet logic. Not all wood belonged on the fire at the same time. Frontiersmen developed an intuitive sequence: tinder that vanished quickly, kindling that whispered and caught, then larger pieces that settled into steady warmth. Each stage had its own sound, its own smell, its own pace. Listening mattered as much as watching. A fire spoke constantly through crackles, sighs, and the subtle collapse of embers. Those who listened knew when to feed it and when to leave it alone. Overfeeding smothered flame. Neglect starved it. Balance kept it alive. Snow added another layer of complexity. Falling snow could extinguish a flame, silently, without warning. To counter this, frontiersmen learned to build fires slightly elevated on beds of bark, green branches, or packed earth. They understood that cold traveled upward relentlessly. Separation from snow and frozen ground was essential. Even then, the fire was rarely left exposed. A simple overhead shelter, fashioned from branches or canvas, angled carefully to avoid trapping smoke, could mean the difference between warmth and darkness. Breath played a surprising role here as well. In close quarters, breathing too forcefully disrupted flame. Breathing too shallowly starved it. Over time, frontiersmen synchronized their movements and breath with the fire itself. Adding fuel during pauses in wind, leaning closer during calm moments, waiting without impatience when conditions shifted. This synchronization created a rhythm that was deeply calming. It slowed thought. It narrowed focus. It kept panic at bay. Through long winters, this rhythm became familiar, even comforting. The fire was no longer something to conquer, but something to accompany. As night deepened, the goal shifted from flame to embers. Embers lasted longer, required less attention, and offered quieter warmth.
Frontiersmen learned to read embers the way others read clocks. The color of the glow, the spacing between coals, the faint heat felt on the back of the hand. From this, they knew how long rest might last before intervention was needed. This allowed them to drift into shallow sleep without fear. In this sleep story, as you imagine hands adjusting wood, snow muffling sound, wind redirected gently away, your own breathing may begin to mirror that older rhythm. Firekeeping was never about speed or strength. It was about patience, awareness, and trust in small actions repeated calmly. The wind still moves, the snow still falls, but within this protected circle, warmth endures, steady and quiet, guiding another night safely toward morning.
As the fire settles into a steady bed of embers, the night reaches its quietest point. This was the moment frontiersmen waited for, not because danger disappeared, but because balance finally arrived. Flame had done its work. Now it was the embers that mattered. Keeping embers alive through snow and wind was a subtle skill, one that required restraint more than action. Frontiersmen learned that embers thrived when left undisturbed, protected but not smothered. They gently drew ash over glowing coals, not to extinguish them, but to slow their breathing. Ash became insulation, holding warmth the way a blanket holds heat around a resting body. This was the fire meant for night, not spectacle, but endurance. The fire no longer demanded constant attention. It allowed the frontiersmen to rest, knowing that warmth would still be there upon waking. Positioning around the embers was deliberate. Bodies were angled to absorb heat evenly. Blankets were draped low, not over the fire, but around its perimeter, creating a shared pocket of warmth. This arrangement minimized movement. Every shift of position was costly. Stillness conserved energy, and energy meant survival. The crackle softened into a faint whisper, a sound that signaled safety rather than urgency. Over time, this sound became deeply associated with rest. It told the nervous system that for now, things were stable. Even the mind responded. Thoughts slowed, attention narrowed, worries lost their sharp edges. In this way, fire did more than warm the body, it regulated emotion. Frontiersmen, though they did not name it as such, understood that fear burned energy as surely as cold. The embers helped quiet the inner noise that could otherwise keep a person awake through the long night. They also understood when to let the fire rest completely. Not every night required a flame until morning. On calmer nights, embers were allowed to fade, trusting layered clothing, shelter, and proximity to others. This trust was earned through experience. Knowing when not to intervene was as important as knowing when to act. Excessive tending led to exhaustion. Wise restraint preserved strength. The frontier rewarded those who learned to do less, but at the right moments. As sleep finally arrived in short, gentle waves, frontiersmen learned to wake without alarm. A glance at embers, a feel of the air, a listening pause. These small checks replaced panic. They grounded the waking mind immediately, preventing fear from taking hold. This calm awakening was another forgotten survival skill. Panic upon waking led to mistakes. Calm led to clarity. In this sleep story, as your own body grows heavier and the world around you fades, imagine lying beside that circle of embers. The wind passes overhead without reaching you. The snow falls quietly, adding insulation rather than threat.
Nothing needs to be done right now. The fire has been prepared. The night is understood. The forgotten survival skills of the frontier were never about conquering nature. They were about alignment, about learning when to act, when to wait, and when to trust processes already set in motion. Fire, once mastered, allowed the mind to rest even in uncertainty. And as the embers dim slowly, you drift with them, safe, warm, and carried gently towards sleep.
As you lie comfortably in your bed tonight, surrounded by quiet walls and familiar warmth, imagine for a moment what it meant to sleep without any shelter at all. No roof, no door, no boundary between your body and the slow, patient movements of the forest. For frontiersmen, this was not imagination, it was the beginning. Before cabins stood in clearings, before smoke curled steadily from chimneys, there was only open land and the urgent need to create protection with nothing but 2 hands and borrowed materials from the earth. The first shelter was never about permanence, it was about surviving the next night. Frontiersmen learned quickly that a home did not need to be strong, it needed to be thoughtful. The land itself offered guidance, wind direction, slope, nearby trees, and the softness of the ground all whispered instructions to those willing to listen. They learned to pause before building, to stand quietly and feel where cold settled, where water pooled, where sound carried. Shelter began with observation, not action. Only after this quiet study did hands begin to move. Branches were chosen not for size, but for cooperation. Flexible limbs bent without snapping, forming frames that held shape gently rather than rigidly. Larger logs rested at angles, leaning rather than standing, creating walls that guided wind upward instead of resisting it directly. This reduced pressure and preserved warmth. There was no rush. Each placement mattered. A misplaced branch could invite drafts that stole sleep slowly through the night. Roofs came next, not as heavy burdens, but as layered shields. Grass, leaves, reeds, and bark were stacked patiently, each layer overlapping the last like scales. This layering trapped air, and trapped air meant insulation. Frontiersmen understood this instinctively long before the science existed. They knew that thick walls were less important than smart ones. Mud and clay followed, pressed gently into gaps, not to harden, but to soften edges where wind might slip through. The shelter slowly took shape, not as a structure imposed on nature, but as something grown from it. Inside, space was kept small on purpose. Large shelters wasted heat. A body could warm a compact space with surprising efficiency. Frontiersmen built shelters just large enough to sit, lie down, and turn carefully, nothing more. Excess space was an invitation to cold. The ground inside was treated with respect. Bare earth pulled warmth away relentlessly. Layers of leaves, pine needles, grasses, and even bark created separation. This bedding was not comfortable in the modern sense, but it was effective. It absorbed moisture, reduced heat loss, and softened the ground just enough for rest. Over time, the repetitive nature of building shelters became calming. Cutting, placing, adjusting, pressing, each motion slowed the mind. The rhythm of construction mirrored the rhythm of breath. Fear gave way to focus. In this sleep story, as you imagine these hands working in fading light, stacking layers, shaping space, you may feel your own thoughts slowing. Building a shelter in the wilderness was never just physical labor, it was mental grounding. It reminded frontiersmen that even in uncertainty, order could be created gently, one small decision at a time.
and as the walls rose and the roof closed overhead, something subtle happened. The world became quieter. Wind softened. Darkness felt less vast. The shelter did not eliminate danger, but it made rest possible. And rest, above all, was what allowed survival to continue.
Once the basic frame of the shelter stood quietly among the trees, the work shifted from structure to comfort. This stage was slower, more deliberate, and deeply calming. Frontiersmen understood that warmth was not created by walls alone, but how those walls interacted with air, moisture, and time. The roof became the most important teacher. A poorly built roof did not simply leak water, it invited cold to settle and stay. So roofs were shaped with patience, never flat, always encouraging snow and rain to slide away rather than collect. Grass and reeds were laid thickly, angled just enough to guide water downward. Each handful pressed gently, not compacted too tightly, because trapped air mattered more than density. Bark strips were overlapped carefully, listening for the soft sound they made when placed correctly. That sound meant protection. Over this, mud was applied sparingly, sealing gaps without crushing the breadth of the shelter. The result was not rigid, but resilient. When wind moved, the roof moved with it, absorbing force instead of resisting it. This flexibility preserved warmth and prevented collapse. Walls followed the same philosophy. Logs were never stacked perfectly flush. Small irregularities were intentional, later filled with moss, leaves, and earth. These natural fillers expanded and contracted with moisture, maintaining seals better than rigid materials ever could. Frontiersmen learned to feel walls with their hands, sensing drafts through fingertips rather than sight. A cold thread of air against skin told them where to add material. This tactile awareness was precise and intimate, turning the act of building into a conversation between body and shelter. Inside, the atmosphere slowly changed. Sounds softened. The wind no longer rushed, but sighed. The smell of earth and wood blended into something grounding and familiar. Light from the fire reflected gently off surfaces rather than escaping into darkness. The shelter did not feel closed in. It felt held. This sensation mattered deeply. It signaled safety to a mind conditioned by uncertainty. Frontiersmen recognized that comfort was not indulgence, it was efficiency. A rested body healed faster, thought clearer, and reacted better to danger. Even the doorway was designed with care. It was never placed directly facing prevailing wind. A simple turn or angled entrance prevented cold air from pouring inside. Sometimes a hanging hide or woven grass mat served as a door, flexible enough to move with air, but thick enough to slow it. Stepping inside required a slight bend, a bow almost, reminding the body to slow down, to leave urgency outside. Over time, these shelters gained character. Smoke darkened the ceiling, sealing it further. Hands polished logs smooth through repeated contact. The shelter became familiar, almost personal, and with familiarity came calm. In this sleep story, as you imagine adding the final layers to the roof, smoothing mud into cracks, adjusting the doorway just enough, you may feel your own breathing deepen. The act of building becomes rhythmic. Place, press, pause, repeat. This rhythm was not only practical, it was soothing. It allowed frontiersmen to release the tension of the open wilderness, replacing it with a sense of enclosure and care. By the time night fully arrived, the shelter was ready. Not perfect, not permanent, but sufficient.
and sufficiency on the frontier was everything.
When the shelter is finally complete, something subtle changes in the night. The forest does not disappear, but it moves farther away. Wind still travels through the trees, but it reaches you softened, filtered, almost polite. Inside the small cabin, time begins to slow. Frontiersmen felt this shift immediately. It was the moment when survival stopped demanding constant action and allowed rest to enter quietly. The last tasks were always the gentlest. Bedding was adjusted, not for comfort in the modern sense, but for balance. Leaves were fluffed to trap air. Grass was pressed just enough to create spring without losing insulation. Blankets, hides, or woven cloth were arranged to follow the body's shape, not fight it. This attention to detail mattered. A body that rested evenly conserved heat and energy. Corners were checked one last time, not with urgency, but with reassurance. Hands brushed walls, feeling for drafts, smoothing rough edges. These gestures were not about fixing problems, they were about familiarity. Touching the shelter made it feel known, and what is known feels safer. The fire inside the shelter was kept modest. Large flames were unnecessary now. Embers provided warmth without stealing oxygen or demanding vigilance. Smoke rose slowly, guided by gaps left intentionally near the roof. These gaps were never mistakes, they were breaths, allowing the shelter to live. Frontiersmen understood that a shelter that breathed stayed warm longer and lasted through changing weather. As night deepened, sounds inside the cabin grew quieter. The outside world faded into a distant presence. Inside, there was the soft sound of settling materials, wood adjusting, earth holding. These sounds were not threats, they were confirmations. The shelter was working. The mind responded by releasing its grip. Muscles loosened, thoughts became heavier, slower. This was the final and perhaps most important survival skill, allowing rest once preparation was complete. Many did not survive the frontier because they could not let go. They stayed alert too long, burned energy they could not replace. Those who endured learned to trust their work, to lie down knowing they had done enough. In this sleep story, as you imagine lying inside that small cabin, walls close but not confining, roof steady above you, you are practicing the same trust. You built this space piece by piece in your mind. You observed, you placed, you adjusted, and now nothing more is required. The night can do what nights have always done, pass quietly. The shelter does not need to be perfect, it only needs to be sufficient. Outside, snow may fall, wind may change direction. Inside, warmth remains. Your breathing finds a slower rhythm, matching the stillness around you. The forgotten survival skills of the frontiersmen were never about speed or strength. They were about patience, attention, and knowing when to stop. And as sleep finally settles fully, you drift within this imagined cabin, held gently by walls shaped from care and time, safe enough to let the world fade. Before there were shelves stocked with endless choices, before lights stayed on through the night and hunger could be postponed with convenience, every meal on the frontier was a quiet negotiation with nature. Food did not arrive on schedule. It revealed itself slowly, reluctantly, and only to those who paid attention. For frontiersmen, eating was never separate from survival. It was survival, stretched across hours, days, and seasons. Imagine stepping into a frontier kitchen at dusk. There are no counters, no polished surfaces, only a low fire,
a blackened pot hanging from an iron hook, and the soft, steady sound of liquid simmering. This sound is not hurried. It does not demand attention. It simply continues, marking time in gentle bubbles. That pot represents patience more than nourishment. What rests inside has been gathered carefully, often over many days. Roots cleaned and sliced thin to dry, meat cut into strips and hung where smoke and air could reach it. Salt used sparingly, not for flavor, but for preservation. Every ingredient carries a memory of effort. Frontiersmen learned early that the most important skill around food was restraint. Eating everything at once meant starving later. They trained themselves to portion, to plan, to think beyond immediate comfort. Meals were simple but deliberate. A stew might stretch a small amount of meat across several days, each reheating, deepening flavor and efficiency. Bones were never discarded quickly. They were boiled again and again, releasing nourishment slowly, completely. Nothing was wasted, because nothing could be replaced easily. Preservation became an art practiced quietly alongside daily work. Meat was dried not in haste, but in alignment with weather. Too much sun ruined it. Too little air spoiled it. Frontiersmen learned to read the sky and wind, choosing days when conditions cooperated. Smokehouses were simple structures, often little more than frames and roofs, yet they transformed fragile food into lasting sustenance. The smell of smoke clung to clothing and hair, becoming part of daily life. Over time, that scent meant security. It meant tomorrow would include food. Even cooking itself was designed to conserve energy. Pots were hung where heat was steady, not fierce. Lids were kept on to reduce fuel use. Stirring was slow, minimal. A pot left alone did most of the work. Frontiersmen understood that food preparation was not a performance. It was a background process meant to support rest, not interrupt it. As night settled, the kitchen became a place of quiet reflection. Sitting near the fire, listening to the stew, watching shadows move gently across rough walls, the mind slowed naturally. Hunger was no longer urgent. It had been acknowledged and addressed. In this sleep story, as you imagine that frontier kitchen, warm and dim, you may feel the same easing. The world does not need to rush. Food will be ready when it is ready. The forgotten survival skill here was trust. Trust in slow processes, in patience rewarded over time. For frontiersmen, this trust allowed them to sleep knowing that even in scarcity, they had done enough for tonight.
After the pot had been set and the fire reduced to a steady glow, the work of food did not end. It simply moved outward, away from the hearth and into the quiet landscape beyond the cabin. On the frontier, hunting was rarely dramatic. It was slow, observant, and deeply respectful of limits. Frontiersmen learned that chasing animals burned more energy than it provided. Instead, they followed signs. Faint tracks pressed into soft ground, broken twigs bent at careful angles, the subtle absence of sound where birds should have been. These clues were read patiently, without urgency. Hunger sharpened attention, but haste dulled it. Traps were set not to conquer nature, but to cooperate with it. Simple snares placed along paths animals already trusted worked while humans rested. This was one of the most important survival skills of all, letting systems work quietly in the background. A well-placed trap was checked gently, often at dawn or dusk, times when movement felt natural rather than intrusive. Success was never assumed. Failure was accepted calmly. The frontier taught quickly that expectation wasted energy. When food appeared, it was received with gratitude rather than celebration. There was no cheering, only careful hands, steady breathing, and the next set of tasks unfolding slowly.
Preparation began immediately because preservation mattered more than the moment itself. Meat was cleaned methodically, movements practiced until they required little thought. Strips were cut evenly to dry at the same rate. Salt was rubbed in with restraint. Too much hardened flesh, too little invited spoilage. This balance came from experience, not instruction. Frontiersmen learned to trust their senses more than measurements. Smell, texture, and color guided decisions. If the air was too damp, drying waited. If insects gathered, smoke was adjusted. Nothing was forced. Everything responded to conditions as they were, not as one wished them to be. Inside the cabin, food preparation became another calming ritual. Knives moved slowly. Surfaces were kept clean with ash and water. Waste was returned to the earth at a distance, maintaining safety without excess effort. Even bones were treated with care, cracked open later for marrow or added to future broths. This continuity stretched nourishment across time. One animal became many meals. This was not thrift for its own sake, it was respect for the effort already spent. As evening returned, the frontier kitchen filled again with gentle sounds. The pot welcomed new additions. The stew thickened slightly, its rhythm unchanged. Hunger softened into anticipation, not urgency. Frontiersmen understood that satisfaction came not from fullness, but from steadiness. Knowing that tomorrow would begin with something warm mattered more than eating until no hunger remained. In this sleep story, as you imagine following those slow movements, setting a trap, returning quietly, preparing food without rush, you may feel your own thoughts loosen. The frontier diet was not about abundance, it was about continuity, about making enough last long enough. And in that steady rhythm, sleep came easily, supported by the knowledge that the night had been prepared for.
By the time the meal was finally ready, night had settled fully around the cabin. Outside, darkness moved gently through the trees, but inside, the small kitchen glowed with quiet warmth. This was the reward frontiersmen worked toward all day, not abundance, but completion. The stew was never hurried. It reached readiness slowly, through hours of patient heat and careful timing. When the lid was lifted, steam rose softly, carrying the scent of roots, meat, and smoke. This scent meant more than nourishment. It meant continuity. It meant the day had been answered properly. Eating was done without rush. Portions were modest, chosen to satisfy without excess. Frontiersmen learned that eating slowly conserved energy and allowed the body to absorb warmth fully. Each bite was deliberate, chewed thoroughly, appreciated without commentary. Conversation, if present at all, was minimal. Silence allowed attention to remain inward, where hunger faded and comfort took its place. The fire beneath the pot was kept low, not extinguished, maintaining a background warmth that lingered after the meal ended. Bowls were set aside gently. Utensils were cleaned with ash and water, movements unhurried. There was no urgency to finish. The kitchen remained active even as the body relaxed. This extended calm was intentional. Frontiersmen understood that sudden transitions from work to rest startled the body. Gradual slowing encouraged deeper sleep. Leftovers were prepared immediately. Portions were cooled, then stored where air could circulate. The stew itself often improved overnight, flavors deepening, nourishment becoming more efficient. This planning into tomorrow reduced anxiety. Knowing the next meal was already in motion allowed the mind to rest more completely. In this way, food preparation extended beyond eating. It shaped emotional stability. As the night deepened, the kitchen transformed again. It became a place of gentle waiting.
The pot no longer bubbled. The fire whispered. Shadows settled into familiar shapes along the walls. The scent of food lingered softly, a reminder that effort had been rewarded. Frontiersmen often sat quietly in this space, neither fully active nor asleep. This in-between state was precious. It allowed digestion to begin, warmth to spread, and thoughts to loosen. The body recognized safety not through fullness alone, but through rhythm. In this sleep story, as you imagine sitting there, warmed by stew and firelight, you may feel your own muscles soften. The idea of scarcity fades. There is enough. There has been enough all along. The forgotten survival skill here was not simply cooking or preservation. It was knowing when a day was complete, when no more effort was required. Many who struggled on the frontier did so because they could not recognize this moment. They pushed too far, spent too much, worried beyond necessity. Those who endured learned to stop at sufficiency, to trust that what had been done would carry them through the night. As sleep approached, the kitchen was left as it was. No perfection was demanded. Clean enough, safe enough, ready enough. The fire was banked. Embers glowed quietly. Outside, the wilderness continued its slow movement, unconcerned. Inside, the frontiersmen rested, supported by warmth, nourishment, and the simple knowledge that tonight had been handled well. And as you drift deeper now, carried by the same steady rhythm, the day closes gently, leaving only rest.
Long before lines were drawn on paper, before arrows pointed the way and voices announced distance, frontiersmen learned to move through the world by listening. Navigation on the frontier was not a problem to solve quickly. It was a relationship to maintain patiently. Without GPS, without modern compasses, direction revealed itself slowly through repetition and attention. Imagine walking beside a frontiersman at dawn. The ground is damp, holding the memory of night. Each step presses gently into soil that tells a story. Tracks are not followed as clear paths, but as suggestions. A faint depression where grass bends differently. A scuffed stone turned slightly from its resting place. These signs are read without urgency. Frontiersmen knew that rushing blurred meaning. Slowness sharpened it. The earth offered guidance to those who treated it as a partner rather than an obstacle. Even mistakes became information. Losing a trail did not cause panic, it invited stillness. Pausing allowed patterns to reappear. Light shifted. Shadows clarified contours. What had been invisible moments earlier revealed itself again. Above, the sky participated quietly. The position of the sun was not measured in degrees, but in warmth and angle. Morning light felt different on the face than afternoon light. Frontiersmen learned to notice how shadows shortened or stretched, how trees cast predictable patterns over hours. Clouds mattered too, not for beauty, but for promise. High, slow-moving clouds suggested stability. Low, fast-moving ones whispered change. None of this demanded immediate reaction. It simply informed decisions made later, gently. Wind carried its own language. It did not need to be strong to be meaningful. A subtle shift in direction changed how sound traveled. Voices carried farther downwind. Fires revealed themselves through scent. Frontiersmen adjusted routes accordingly, avoiding exposure without conscious calculation. They learned to feel wind on the skin, not just observe it. Cold wind sharpened awareness. warm wind relaxed it. This awareness was stored quietly, used when needed. Birds played a role as well. Their absence mattered as much as their presence. A sudden hush suggested movement elsewhere. Alarm calls, repeated rhythmically, hinted at disturbance. Frontiersmen did not chase these signals. They acknowledged them and continued, allowing the land to communicate without interruption. Over time, navigation became less about finding the fastest path and more about staying aligned. Paths were chosen for ease, not speed. Ridgelines offered consistency. Valleys offered water but demanded caution. The land itself suggested where humans belonged. In this sleep story, as you imagine walking slowly, noticing these signs without naming them, your own mind may begin to soften. There is no destination to reach right now, only movement guided by quiet agreement. The forgotten survival skill here was trust. Trust that nature, when observed patiently, provided enough information to keep one safe. Frontiersmen did not conquer distance, they cooperated with it. And in that cooperation, stress dissolved into rhythm. As night approaches in your imagination, the land grows quieter, but the signs do not disappear. They simply become subtler. And you, listening without effort, drift along, supported by a world that knows how to guide without speaking.
As daylight faded and the sun slipped lower, navigation on the frontier did not end. It simply changed its language. When the ground grew harder to read, the sky took over. Frontiersmen learned to lift their gaze without losing awareness of what lay beneath their feet. The sky was never just a backdrop, it was an active map, slowly turning above them. Stars emerged one by one, not in haste, but in quiet order. Frontiersmen did not memorize constellations as names or myths. They remembered relationships. One star rising slightly earlier than another. A familiar pattern rotating just enough to suggest direction. The North Star, when visible, offered reassurance rather than instruction. It was not a command to follow, but a steady reference point that reduced uncertainty. Knowing where north rested allowed the body to relax, even when the path ahead remained unknown. The moon also played its role. Its phase mattered more than its beauty. A full moon extended visibility but shortened shadows. A thin crescent softened contrast, making movement quieter and less noticeable. Frontiersmen adjusted travel accordingly, sometimes choosing to move more, sometimes choosing to wait. Waiting was never seen as failure, it was a skill. Clouds added nuance. Thin, high clouds drifting slowly suggested calm nights ahead. Thick layers gathering from a single direction hinted at approaching weather. The speed of cloud movement mattered as much as their shape. Fast-moving clouds meant shifting winds. Slow ones promised stability. These observations did not cause anxiety, they offered preparation. Frontiersmen learned that knowing what was coming mattered more than hoping it would not arrive. Wind continued to speak through the night. Its tone changed as temperature shifted. A dry, steady wind carried sound far. A damp one swallowed it. Frontiersmen used this knowledge to choose where to camp, where to rest, and where to remain alert. Even the way leaves responded, fluttering lightly or clinging still, provided clues. Nature rarely shouted, it whispered consistently. Listening required patience, not effort. In moments of uncertainty, frontiersmen stopped moving entirely. Standing still allowed senses to recalibrate. Eyes adjusted to darkness. Ears separated layered sounds. The body aligned with its surroundings again. This pause often revealed what motion had hidden. A ridgeline silhouetted against the sky,
a break in cloud cover marking direction, a subtle glow where water reflected faint light. Navigation was not about constant progress, it was about correct progress. In this sleep story, as you imagine lying beneath a sky filled with slow-moving stars, you may feel your own thoughts stretch and thin. Time loses urgency. Direction becomes less about destination and more about orientation. The forgotten survival skill here was patience with uncertainty. Frontiersmen accepted that not all answers arrived immediately. Some revealed themselves only when the mind stopped pushing. And in that acceptance, calm replaced fear. As night deepened, the sky continued its gentle rotation, steady and reliable. The land remained beneath, supportive and quiet. And you, following these signs without effort, drift further into rest, guided by a world that knows how to orient without demanding control.
As the night settles fully and movement slows, the signs of land, sky, and wind begin to speak together rather than separately. This was the moment frontiersmen trusted most, not because everything was clear, but because everything aligned. Navigation became less about choosing and more about recognizing. The body, after hours of quiet observation, no longer needed constant interpretation. It felt direction intuitively. Feet adjusted to slope without thought. Shoulders angled naturally away from wind. Eyes lifted and lowered in rhythm, taking in just enough information. This integration was the final skill, the one that made all others usable. Frontiersmen did not carry maps in their minds, they carried familiarity. Repeated exposure to the same patterns, how ridges curved, how rivers bent, how wind returned each evening, created an internal sense of place. Even in unfamiliar territory, this familiarity transferred. New landscapes were read through the memory of old ones. Differences stood out gently, not alarmingly. A creek sounded slightly wrong. A breeze arrived too early. These discrepancies were noted calmly, prompting adjustment rather than fear. This calm responsiveness kept them alive. As camps were chosen for the night, signs were consulted one last time. Not exhaustively, but respectfully. The ground was tested with weight, listening for hollowness or softness. Trees were observed for dead branches silhouetted above. The wind's path was traced by drifting leaves or the faint pull on clothing. None of this required tension. It was a practiced flow. Once chosen, the place was accepted. Frontiersmen understood that second-guessing wasted energy, better spent resting. Trusting the reed was essential. Inside the body, this trust created stillness. Muscles released, breathing deepened. The nervous system, no longer scanning urgently, settled into a receptive state. This was when sleep became possible, even in wild places. The land had been listened to, the sky had been acknowledged, the wind had been accounted for. Nothing more was required. In this sleep story, as you imagine lying there, surrounded by quiet signals that no longer demand attention, you may feel the same settling. The world does not need to be controlled to be navigable, it only needs to be noticed. The forgotten survival skill here was integration, allowing information to blend into intuition, allowing awareness to become gentle rather than sharp. Frontiersmen survived not by constant vigilance, but by knowing when vigilance could soften. As the night deepens further, signs fade into background rhythm. Stars continue their slow passage. Wind finds a steady tone. The ground remains supportive and unmoving. Direction no longer matters because movement has paused, and in that pause, rest arrives naturally. You drift now, guided not by effort, but by alignment, held within a world that quietly knows where you are.
In the quiet hours of evening, when the fire has settled and movement slows, frontiersmen often reached into their pockets without urgency. What they carried there was never impressive to look at. No polished tools, no unnecessary weight, just a few small objects, worn smooth by time and use, resting close to the body. These items mattered not because they were new, but because they were known. A small knife, its blade dulled from years of cutting rope, trimming wood, opening food parcels. It was never sharp enough to be dangerous, yet always sharp enough to be useful. Frontiersmen learned that an over-sharp blade invited accidents, a slightly worn one invited control. The knife was used slowly, carefully, almost absent-mindedly, because its shape and balance were familiar. In moments of stress, familiarity mattered more than precision. Nearby, a coil of twine or cord rested, frayed at the ends, shortened by countless repairs. This cord had held shelters together, bound splints, secured food, fixed clothing. It carried the memory of problems solved quietly. Frontiersmen understood that rope was not just material, it was possibility. Something loose could be secured, something broken could be held. The presence of cord reduced anxiety long before it was ever used. Even when untouched, it promised options. Sometimes, tucked deeper, there was a small compass, often inaccurate by modern standards, its needle slow to settle. Frontiersmen did not rely on it blindly. They used it as confirmation rather than instruction. The compass did not replace the land, it simply whispered reassurance when clouds hid stars or when terrain became confusing. Its value lay in steadiness. Watching the needle calm itself mirrored the calming of the mind. Waiting for it to settle taught patience in moments when panic would have been easier. Other items were even humbler, a pouch of dry tobacco, not always for smoking, but for trade, for calming nerves, for marking time during long waits. The smell alone carried familiarity, anchoring the mind in routine. And then there was the flint, a small stone, often overlooked, yet essential. It did not promise fire instantly, it demanded repetition. Strike, pause, adjust, strike again. Frontiersmen appreciated this. Fire created through effort felt earned, dependable. The flint taught rhythm. It required focus without urgency, attention without strain. Using it slowed breathing naturally. These objects were never displayed proudly. They stayed close, warmed by the body, absorbing its scent, becoming extensions of the person carrying them. Over time, they shaped behavior. Knowing what was available reduced impulsive action. A frontiersman who trusted his tools moved more deliberately, wasted less energy, reacted less dramatically to setbacks. The true survival skill here was not the object itself, but the relationship with it. Tools were chosen once and kept long. Learning their limits meant fewer surprises. In this sleep story, as you imagine a hand opening slowly, revealing these simple items against firelight, you may feel your own shoulders soften. Nothing here demands immediate action. Each object tells a quiet story of problems already solved. The forgotten skill was preparation without obsession, carrying just enough, trusting it completely. And as the night deepens, these items remain where they belong, close and reassuring, allowing the body to rest, knowing that if needed, help is already within reach. As the night deepened and the fire reduced itself to a quiet glow, frontiersmen did not inventory their belongings with worry. They simply felt their presence, a slight weight in the pocket, a familiar shape against the palm. These sensations were enough. Survival on the frontier was not built on constant checking, but on quiet assurance. Knowing what you carried allowed the mind to release what it did not need to hold. These small objects worked together, not as tools in isolation, but as a system of calm. The knife meant food could be prepared slowly. The cord meant shelter could be adjusted without panic. The compass meant direction could be confirmed if uncertainty crept in. The flint meant warmth would return when darkness cooled the air. None of these items promised ease, they promised continuity. Frontiersmen learned that continuity was more valuable than comfort. Comfort faded quickly. Continuity carried you through the night. Even the way these items were stored mattered. Pockets were arranged deliberately. The most trusted objects rested where the hand reached without looking. This muscle memory reduced decision-making at critical moments. When the body acted without debate, energy was conserved, and conserving energy was survival. Over time, these habits shaped temperament. Frontiersmen became quieter, not because they lacked words, but because they lacked unnecessary movement. They understood that every motion cost something. Carrying fewer objects meant carrying fewer worries. Each item earned its place through repeated usefulness. Anything unused was eventually left behind. This discipline created clarity. In moments when the wilderness felt vast and indifferent, that clarity grounded them. The world might be unpredictable, but their pockets were not. This predictability fostered trust, not just in tools, but in oneself. Trust allowed sleep to arrive even in exposed places. A person who trusted their preparation did not replay the day endlessly. They rested. In this sleep story, as you imagine these objects settling back into place, warmth returning to fingers, the fire whispering softly, you may feel the same reassurance. Nothing more needs to be done. Everything essential is already close. The forgotten survival skill here was restraint, resisting the urge to carry everything, choosing instead to carry what had proven itself. This restraint lightened the body and the mind. As night progressed, the small sounds of the camp faded. The tools remained silent, doing their work simply by being there. The knife did not cut, the flint did not spark, the compass did not turn. Their usefulness paused, and that pause was allowed. Frontiersmen understood that even tools needed rest. The land outside continued its slow breathing. Inside, the human breath followed suit. And as sleep finally settled fully, it was not guarded by weapons or plans, but by familiarity, the quiet confidence that tomorrow could be met because tonight was handled with care. You drift now with that same confidence, held by the simple truth that preparedness does not need to be loud to be effective.
The longest winter on the frontier was never remembered for a single dramatic moment. It was remembered for its length, for how it stretched time, softened urgency, and turned survival into a practice of patience rather than strength. When winter arrived, frontiersmen did not prepare for heroism, they prepared for repetition. Day after day, the landscape changed very little. Snow fell, wind returned, silence grew thicker, and within that stillness, life narrowed to a few essential routines. Wood had to be cut, not all at once, but steadily. Too much effort in one day led to exhaustion that lingered for weeks, so chopping became slow and measured. Each swing of the axe followed a rhythm learned through necessity. Pause, breathe, adjust grip. The sound of wood splitting was familiar, comforting in its predictability. Inside the cabin, Clothing required constant attention. Sleeves wore thin, seams loosened. Frontiersmen sat close to the fire, needle moving quietly through fabric, repairing the same garments again and again. These repairs were not temporary. They were ongoing conversations with wear and time. The act of mending slowed thoughts, focused hands, and created a sense of control in a season defined by uncontrollable weather. Food was eaten carefully. Portions remained modest, even when supplies seemed sufficient. Winter taught restraint more strictly than any other season. Eating less today meant eating tomorrow. Meals followed a predictable pattern, soups and stews returning again and again, warmed slowly, never rushed. The repetition itself became reassuring. It reduced decision-making, preserved energy, and allowed the mind to rest from constant choice. Outside, storms came and went. Frontiersmen learned to count them not by severity, but by number. One storm passed, another followed. Each was endured without commentary. Windows, if present at all, were covered. Light became precious. Darkness was accepted. Long nights were filled with quiet tasks, sharpening tools gently, sorting supplies, sitting still and listening to the wind move around the cabin rather than against it. This acceptance was a survival skill rarely celebrated. Many struggled, not because winter was harsh, but because they fought it emotionally. Those who survived longest learned to let winter exist without resistance. They aligned their pace with it. Slower movements, longer rest, shorter expectations. Time itself seemed to behave differently. Days blended together. The calendar lost importance. What mattered was the routine. Wake, tend fire, eat, mend, rest, sleep. This structure anchored the mind when the outside world offered little variation. In this sleep story, as you imagine sitting inside that cabin, snow pressing softly against the walls, firelight flickering steadily, you may feel the same calming effect. There is nothing you need to rush toward, nothing to escape. Winter will pass in its own time. The forgotten survival skill here was endurance through gentleness, not pushing harder, but lasting longer. And as the longest winter continues quietly, you drift alongside it, carried not by force, but by patience.
As the winter continued, something subtle happened inside the cabin. Time stopped feeling like an enemy and began to feel like a companion. Frontiersmen learned that the longest winters were survived not by counting the days until spring, but by releasing the need to count at all. Morning and evening blurred gently together. Light arrived briefly, then withdrew. The fire became the center of the day, not because it demanded attention, but because it offered steadiness. Tending it became a meditation. Add a log, wait, watch the flames settle, adjust airflow slightly. These small actions anchored the mind. Outside, snow accumulated layer by layer, but inside, the world remained familiar and contained. Mental survival mattered as much as physical survival. Loneliness crept in quietly during long winters, not as sadness, but as restlessness. Frontiersmen countered this not with distraction, but with engagement. Simple tasks filled hours without exhausting the body. Whittling wood into small objects that were rarely finished. Reorganizing supplies that did not need reorganizing. Reading the same few pages of a book or letter again and again, not for information, but for connection. These repetitions soothed the nervous system. They reminded the mind that it was still part of a rhythm, even when the outside world felt paused. Silence itself became a tool. Rather than fearing it, frontiersmen learned to inhabit it. Silence allowed internal noise to settle. Thoughts slowed. Worries lost urgency. When storms howled outside, the contrast made the quiet inside feel deeper and more protective. Even sleep adjusted to winter. Nights were longer and rest came in segments. Frontiersmen accepted this without frustration. Waking briefly to tend the fire or shift position was not seen as failure, it was seen as responsiveness. Listening to the body's needs was essential. Pushing for uninterrupted sleep often led to fatigue. Allowing natural cycles preserved energy. This flexibility extended to expectations about productivity. Winter was not a season for progress, it was a season for maintenance. Tools were sharpened, not used. Plans were reviewed, not executed. Memories were revisited. Stories were told softly, often repeated, each retelling slightly different, shaped by the moment rather than the need to entertain. These repetitions soothed the nervous system. They reminded the mind that it was still part of a rhythm, even when the outside world felt paused. Silence itself became a tool. In this sleep story, as you imagine another quiet winter evening unfolding, firelight steady, snow falling without sound, you may feel permission to slow completely. There is nothing missing, nothing falling behind. Winter asks only that you remain. The forgotten survival skill here was acceptance of stillness, understanding that not every season requires forward motion. Some require endurance through presence alone. As the longest winter stretches onward, the cabin holds warmth, routines hold structure, and the mind finds rest not by escaping the season, but by settling fully within it. And as you drift deeper now, the repetition becomes comforting, the silence supportive, and sleep arrives without resistance, carried gently by patience.
As the journey through forgotten survival skills begins to slow, something else gently comes forward. The feeling that these skills were never meant to be impressive. They were meant to be quiet companions to ordinary days. Over time, many of them slipped out of daily life, not because they failed, but because the world changed around them. Roads replaced trails, lights replaced fire, buttons replaced knots, and yet the memory of those skills never fully disappeared. It settled into books, into museum displays, into the stories told by older voices who remembered a slower pace. Frontiersmen themselves would not have called what they did skills. To them, these were simply ways of moving through a day without wasting energy, ways of listening rather than forcing. The knife in the pocket, the fire tended patiently, the shelter built low and warm. None of it was heroic, it was sufficient. And sufficiency was the quiet achievement that allowed life to continue. In this sleep story, as you revisit these moments, there is no need to imagine danger or hardship. Instead, imagine continuity, a line of evenings stretching gently through time, each one similar to the last, each one handled with care. These skills faded not because they lost value, but because they succeeded. They created enough safety that urgency no longer dominated life. The modern world inherited their results without inheriting their rhythms. Today, warmth arrives instantly. Food appears with little effort. Direction is spoken aloud by devices that never tire.
but the old rhythm still lives somewhere deeper, in the way the body relaxes near a fire, in the comfort found in repetition, in the relief of knowing that nothing more is required right now. Frontiersmen understood this instinctively. They did not cling to skills as identity. They let them serve quietly. When a skill was no longer needed, it rested. This humility is part of why their stories feel calming now. There is no urgency to replicate their lives, only to remember that slowness once kept people alive. As you listen, the images soften. Footprints in snow fade as new snow settles. Hands that struck flint grow still. The wind that once guided movement becomes background sound. These skills retreat gently, not into loss, but into rest. They have done their work. The story remains because it offers perspective. It reminds us that survival was once about attention rather than accumulation, about patience rather than speed, about trusting small, repeated actions. In this moment, as you lie in a modern room surrounded by quiet convenience, the past does not ask to be revived. It asks only to be acknowledged. A nod of gratitude for the countless ordinary evenings that made today possible. The forgotten survival skill here is remembering without longing, letting history be complete. And as your breathing becomes more even, the distance between then and now feels gentle rather than vast. The frontier does not call you back. It wishes you rest.
As the story continues to soften, the frontier itself begins to recede. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but the way a landscape fades when night deepens. The cabin grows quieter. The fire no longer needs tending. The tools that once mattered rest where they were placed, untouched, unneeded. This is how forgotten skills truly disappear, not in failure, but in completion. They leave behind no urgency, only calm. Frontiersmen did not carry nostalgia for their own lives. They lived forward, one evening at a time, never imagining that these ordinary moments would one day become stories told to help others sleep. Yet here we are, listening not for instruction, but for reassurance. These skills no longer ask to be practiced. They ask to be remembered gently, without pressure. There is something deeply human in that exchange, a quiet acknowledgement that effort once mattered, and that now, rest matters more. The past does not compete with the present. It supports it. Each forgotten skill is like a breath already taken, necessary once, now complete. As you lie still, your surroundings feel different from the frontier, yet connected in subtle ways. Warmth still signals safety. Repetition still calms the nervous system. Silence still carries meaning. The difference is that tonight, you do not need to earn these comforts. They are already here. This realization allows the body to release its grip on alertness. Frontiersmen remained awake because survival required it. You remain awake only until sleep arrives naturally. There is no watch to keep, no fire to guard. The mind, noticing this absence of responsibility, begins to slow. Thoughts lengthen, then dissolve. Images of snow-covered paths, quiet hands, and steady routines fade into abstraction. What remains is not history, but rhythm. The rhythm of breathing, the rhythm of stillness. This is where the story gently steps back, not with a farewell, but with trust. Trust that the work of remembering has been done. Trust that you are safe enough to let go. In museums, these skills are labeled and explained.
In books, they are categorized and preserved. But here, in this quiet moment, they simply rest. They no longer need words. The frontier has given all it needs to give. As your breathing evens out, the last images drift away. Footsteps dissolve into silence. Firelight dims into darkness. The skills that once kept people alive withdraw fully, leaving behind something simpler and more enduring. A sense that survival does not always mean struggle. Sometimes it means allowing yourself to stop. And as the night continues, you remain, breathing softly, carried by a story that no longer asks for attention. Sleep does not arrive as an ending, but as a continuation. Another quiet night added to the long line of ordinary evenings that have always sustained human life.